Good evening, KSQD listeners. It's every other Sunday again, and you are listening to Sustainability Now, a biweekly KSQD radio show focused on environment, sustainability, and social justice in the Monterey Bay region, California, and the world. I'm your host, Ronnie Lipschutz. Water in California is a perennial concern. Sometimes there is too much, and sometimes there is not enough. And sometimes the water is not very good, tainted by salt, sewage, and other contaminants, both natural and synthetic. My guest today is Chelsea Tu, the recently appointed executive director of a new local nonprofit, Monterey Waterkeeper. Ms. Tu is a lawyer by training and a practitioner of environmental law with a focus on climate, land use, and environmental justice issues. Monterey Waterkeeper combines education, science-based policy advocacy, and legal action to ensure that all communities, including low-income communities of color, have safe, affordable drinking water and enjoy clean, swimmable, and fishable waters. Chelsea Tu, welcome to Sustainability Now. Are you there?
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's
Yes.
great to have you. You are there. Yes, good.
Can you hear me okay now?
I can, yes. So,
Great.
Let's begin with your background. Tell us how you came to practice environmental law and where you went to law school and worked.
Well, it's a bit of a long story, starting from my childhood. So I grew up in Taiwan, which is an island full of mountains and roaring rivers. So many of my favorite memories as a child really involved enjoying being in nature, enjoying fishing with my dad in the mountains, for example. At the same time, my home was in the city, and I realized what pollution, especially water pollution, looked like and smelled like from an early age. On my way to school, I passed by the channeled river next to my house that always looked murky and gray and often smell like sewage. So I think since a young age, I've really seen and lived the differences between clean and polluted environments, specifically water environments, and how that really impacts our well-being from mental to physical health. And when my family moved from Taiwan to the Bay Area when I was 10 years old, everything changed. We didn't speak English. My parents really didn't have the means to go back to school, so they worked low-wage jobs to provide for the family. Yet, nature and appreciation of nature is always, in the family, and so we continued to seek refuge, exploring nearby parks and rivers. It wasn't until I studied environmental science in college that I learned about environmental injustices, especially where environmental pollution is most prevalent in, where low-income families live and where families of colors live. Families just like mine, whether these families are more likely to live next to sources of pollution like oil and gas facilities or factories, and are more likely exposed to inequities like contaminated drinking water. So I think all of this exposure to environmental injustices and my love for environment really led me to feel a personal responsibility to make sure that families that are like mine, low-income families, families of colors, and really all families can enjoy healthy, clean environment, because that's really the basis of a healthy family. So I ended up pursuing a career in environmental law so that I can have the tools to be able to advocate for a clean environment for everyone.
Okay. And where did you work previous to this particular position, which we'll talk about in just a minute? Okay.
So my first job out of college was actually working as a research assistant. Water issues. I worked for an environmental consulting company that did coastal marine management. in California. And this role really opened my eyes up to the fact that our coastal, and not only to the fact that our coastal and marine ecosystems are so fragile, but that caring for the ocean, caring for the coast really also means caring for and reducing pollution from everything that happens upstream, from wastewater to pesticides to plastics, all of which ends up in the ocean. And I went to law school after working at the consulting company, after which I worked on a variety of issues at different nonprofits. For example, I worked on protecting freshwater supply for endangered salmon in the San Francisco Bay Delta. And I also recently worked alongside low-income communities of color in the Central Valley to stop oil and gas drilling near homes and schools. So I learned a lot from working on different issues in different communities, especially in California. But I've really always wanted to get back to working on water, especially water quality, which, of course, affects every aspect of our everyday lives. And so that's kind of my environmental law practice in a nutshell. And I'm really privileged and honored to be able to work on issues in the Monterey Bay, and where I've lived for 3 years now.
Oh, okay. And how did you get hired as executive director of Monterey Waterkeeper? Was it something you applied for? Did you just for our listeners, something you applied for? Did you know someone? I mean, what was the process?
Yeah, it was a quick process, and I think it just kind of happened. I did apply for this position, and the organization had just started. It was incorporated in December of 2021, and they've been looking for an executive director for a while. And I was looking for, a new organization that I could, really work in and contribute to the sustainability of my community, like I was saying earlier. I think the organization's focus on water quality protection really speaks to me personally, as well as professionally. And I'm really lucky to kind of come full circle after having worked on a lot of different types of issues, to now working on water quality protection with Monterey Waterkeeper.
Well, okay. So what is Monterey Waterkeeper's history, and how did it come then into existence? I mean, on one hand, it has a predecessor, right? On the other hand, it's a new organization. So maybe you can tell us something about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, Monterey Waterkeeper is really a new organization. But prior to that, Monterey Waterkeeper was known actually as Monterey Coastkeeper. And Monterey Coastkeeper was housed under the Otter Project, and really did a lot of work in 15 years prior, focusing primarily on protecting the Central Coast's waterways and Monterey Bay from agricultural pollution. And so prior to Monterey Coastkeeper being incorporated and then becoming Monterey Waterkeeper, really our organization focused on a lot on watchdogging and making sure that our waterways are safe from pesticides and nitrates, coming from agricultural fertilizers. And we were not only before the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board advocating for strong regulation on agricultural runoff, but also brought a series of lawsuits to keep our regional board and permittees accountable for making sure that the Monterey Bay's waterways are clean for everyone. So that's really important work that Monterey Coastkeeper and now Monterey Waterkeeper was doing, and really nobody else, is really doing from the public interest perspective. So moving forward, I'm committed to continuing this important legacy work and continuing to advocate for strong pollution regulation standards from agriculture as well as from other sources of pollution. And moving forward as well, I also want to draw on my background on environmental justice to tackle some of the biggest inequities or water injustices that lie in our region, from the lack of safe drinking water in low-income communities in Santa Cruz and Monterey counties, to their lack of access by the same people to our beautiful and unique freshwater and coastal resources that we're so lucky to have on the Central Coast.
Well, before we take a break, tell us what are the biggest water quality issues on the Central Coast? I mean, you've mentioned some of them, but maybe you can be a little bit more specific about them.
Absolutely. The Central Coast is, by way of background, almost exclusively dependent on groundwater. Groundwater feeds everything, from our streams and rivers to, supplying our drinking water to irrigation water. So, we all depend on groundwater, whether you're a regular household, turning on your tap, or whether you're a farmer in Pajaro Valley or the Salinas Valley. So, and because of the way that our surface waters like Pajaro River and Salinas River and Carmel River are so intertwined with our groundwater sources, we really have a pretty unique situation where water supply issues go hand in hand with water quality problems because the waterways between surface water and groundwater are just so interconnected. Mm-hmm. A lot of our groundwater and surface waters are contaminated with nitrates, pesticides, and different nutrients. And this is largely from agricultural runoff. I think the connection is probably self-evident because our region, whether you live in Santa Cruz County or Monterey County, one of our biggest sources of income here is agriculture. And so agricultural runoff, and specifically nitrates and pesticides and other contaminants like 1,2,3 TCP, or that is an associated chemical associated with specific fumigant called Telone. Our waterways are full of those things, and I want to emphasize that these contaminants are not only prevalent among the waterways of the Central Coast. They really hit hardest in communities that rely on private wells or small water systems that serve low-income folks, where the folks that are reliant on these groundwater, contaminated groundwater sources, don't necessarily have the means to check, if how much their groundwater is contaminated, much less spend millions and millions of dollars to be able to clean up this contamination. So I'll just give an example of the San Gerardo Cooperative, or San Gerardo community that Monterey Waterkeeper works with. So this community is just south of the city of Salinas and has about 60 plus households, or 350 or so people living in this community. And most of the community members are low-income Latinx families. And the community of San Gerardo right now is actually on their fourth well, because the three other wells that they have depended on in the past have just been so heavily contaminated with nitrate and 1,2,3 TCP that they've had to abandon their previous wells and try to find a well, that's close enough with, water contaminant levels that are low enough so that the residents can drink that. And that's just an injustice that needs to be addressed, not only in the San Gerardo community, which fortunately, really took on a lot of work in advocacy and getting money to be able to, get their fourth well and to have, safer drinking water. But these water injustices, are, in a lot of communities, in Santa Cruz and Monterey counties.
All right, you're listening to Sustainability Now. My guest today is Chelsea Tu, who is the executive director of a new Monterey Bay organization called Monterey Waterkeeper. We've just been talking about her background and the organization's background. And Chelsea was telling us about a particular community south of Salinas, which is now on its fourth well. And I'm curious about two things, Chelsea. First of all, how did the community discover that its water was polluted? And second, how did the community, get the funding to drill the fourth well?
The community of San Gerardo has been there since the 70s, and over a long period of time, many community members have gotten sick. Community members, for example, have gotten, weird rashes they cannot explain. And the rashes, really went away when the community members decided to drink from bottled water and, minimize showering and washing from their groundwater. So they've, since really been diligent about testing their water, and so they have a long record of the different contaminants that are in their drinking water. One community leader mentioned to me that they know that the heavy nitrate contamination, for example, comes from nearby farms because a farm was adjacent to the community actually fallowed for a year, and after the fallowing period, the groundwater tests showed that nitrate levels went down by 50% just in that period alone after fallowing.
Wow. Does the community do its own?
You asked me about how. You asked me about how the community was able to get money to be able to drill new wells. And,
right.
Well, I think this speaks to the perseverance, determination of the community. And this is, well before, of course, I joined the organization, because the work on getting money for new wells for safer water really began in the 1990s, where community advocated both locally at the state level as well as with the US EPA in order to get funding, I believe, from the US EPA in order to drill new wells that are, relatively safer to drink from.
But so they got money for the second and third wells as well, or from public, from this funding, or just for the fourth? And I was also curious, was the community doing its own water testing?
I'm not sure exactly which wells or series of wells the US EPA funding was able to provide for, but definitely the funding was able to set up the community's latest drinking water system and to drill the new wells that they currently use. And yes, I do their own groundwater quality testing on a regular basis.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so most of the water, as you pointed out, that's a lot of the water that's used in the Monterey Bay region is surface water or groundwater. Santa Cruz has its surface water supplies, but a lot of people get water from wells. And I know that there is a new California law about groundwater management. Can you tell us something about that and how it might relate to the issues of concern to you?
Absolutely. So in 2014, the state of California passed a law called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which we call it SIGMA for short. And SIGMA really, for the first time, required groundwater basins that are heavily reliant on groundwater for different uses, and also groundwater basins that are overdrafted, to come up with a plan to reach sustainability by 2040. So water districts all over California, including water districts and other stakeholders in overdrafted basins like Pajaro Valley Basin and Salinas Valley Basin, got together and they formed what's called groundwater sustainability agencies that are supposed to come up with these plans. So all of the critically overdrafted basins come up with plans, including the ones I just mentioned here in the Central Coast. And so they did that in 2020 and are now, 2 years later, kind of in the very beginning phase to implement these plans. And what's really concerning here, especially in the Salinas Valley groundwater basin, is that the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin Sustainability Agency, has not really established affirmative pumping restrictions from agricultural pumping or agricultural uses to prevent water quality, all of the water contamination I just talked about from getting worse. Mm-hmm. And pumping restrictions is important in agriculture because not only is the region groundwater dependent, 90% of groundwater use actually comes from agricultural uses in the Salinas Valley. Mm-hmm. And then in the last 5 years, we've not only seen no pumping restrictions, but we're also seeing new wells that are being proposed or drilled, and wells are being drilled deeper and deeper. And the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, so far has not done anything to stop this. Whether it's from overpumping in existing wells or halting new permit applications, nor are they studying the impacts of proposed wells or existing wells on drinking water safety, especially in disadvantaged communities. And so all of this is really concerning, and Monterey Waterkeeper is certainly keeping a close eye on what the Groundwater Sustainability Agency does or the agencies do in Santa Cruz and Monterey counties to make sure that the very source that all of us rely on, groundwater, is managed in a way that not simply continue to allow the status quo of overpumping, but that we really take appropriate measures to restrict pumping and to make sure that the water that we do have, that we use it in an equitable way, and we make sure that groundwater quality is safe for all of the community.
Do the agricultural chemicals percolate into the deeper aquifers as much as into the shallower aquifers? I'm just curious about that.
I've seen stories and reports talking about that, but I think that there definitely needs to be more studies done to show the correlation of overpumping and then water contamination seeping deeper and deeper into the deeper aquifers.
Yeah. Well, what is the state's legal and regulatory framework for regulating and managing water quality? I mean, we were just talking about the sustainability of groundwater. Now, let's shift to who is responsible for ensuring water quality, and what does that entail on the part of the state and the other agencies?
Right. So, in the Central Coast, the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, or Regional Water Board for short, is the primary agency that's responsible for regulating water quality in general, and it's really done that with surface water, for the past decades, and that's because, like I mentioned, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SIGMA, really didn't come into force until 2014, 2015. So groundwater, water quality, and groundwater was, basically not managed at the state or regional level until that law was passed. But the Central Coast Water Quality Board does play a really important role for setting and enforcing water quality objectives, and for creating requirements for discharge or pollution from point sources, which are for example wastewater from a manufacturing facility or specific point, and also for creating requirements for discharge of non-point source pollution, like agricultural wastewater that I mentioned a little earlier, and for stormwater. In Monterey County, there's also a Monterey County Water Resources Agency, which manages a series of ditches and pumps that really manage land use as well as facilitate water movement in the Salinas Valley and the Salinas River. And then, as we talked about, there's emerging groundwater sustainability agencies that are really just in the beginning of grasping how to measure the extent of overdraft in our groundwater basins in the Central Coast, and really putting their heads on creating a management plan and implementing that plan to make sure that groundwater is, not only groundwater supply is managed sustainably over time, but also that we don't draw down too much of our supply, which has negative impacts on groundwater quality as well as surface water qualities. And then lastly, you have various drinking water as well as wastewater management districts in the northern Central Coast, some of which are public and some of which are private. So I think the question on who is responsible for water quality in the Central Coast is definitely a good one, and we're seeing really just a patchwork of regulatory agencies, and this is not unique to the Central Coast, but definitely throughout California as well, where each agency, whether it's a wastewater district, management district, or the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, really holds a piece of the puzzle on both protecting surface, ground, and groundwater supply as well as quality.
Do these agencies talk to each other?
Sometimes they do.
It sounds like, a remarkable number of agencies are responsible, as you put it, different parts of the puzzle, and that seems terribly inefficient.
Yes, I would definitely agree with you on that. Whether you're looking at the water supply world or water quality world, which, as I mentioned, is really one and the same in the Central Coast, where all of the waters intermingle and then end up in the ocean. It's really complicated policy legal landscape, and it's really complicated politically. And I think the good news is that with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, forcing agencies to come up with a plan for a common groundwater basin interconnected with surface waters, and also obviously impacting drinking water or supplies drinking water. That forces agencies to come together, and also California continues to face drought conditions, more frequently and that are more severe. I'm seeing agencies come together and really figuring out, what can we do together to make sure that we talk to each other, we're able to supply water in each other's districts, and just manage what we have more efficiently and more equitably together.
I'm curious. I know you're still building your website, but do you plan to have some description of all of these different agencies and what their responsibilities are? I think that would be enormously educational and illuminating, because I'm sort of stunned by it. I know that the legislature, the California legislature, gets confronted by issues. Somebody introduces a bill, and the bill says, "Well, let's start a new agency to address this particular problem," right? And then that gets passed on to this new agency, and they have to start to define what it is they're going to do. But it doesn't seem as though there's much consideration of these overlapping responsibilities and mission conflicts, I suppose one could call it. But of course, it's not the case only with water. So let's get back to Monterey Waterkeeper. What kinds of projects are you planning?
Okay. As we're starting out, our organization, in Second Life, I think, as I mentioned, we want to continue to carry our legacy work of watchdogging, making sure that agricultural pollution is regulated in the Central Coast, and so that's something that is a focus area for Monterey Waterkeeper this year and to future years. So when the latest version of the agricultural discharge requirements, or what we typically call an agricultural order or ag order, when that latest version, the fourth version, was approved by the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board last year, Monterey Waterkeeper, which I mentioned was Monterey Coastkeeper, filed a petition for review to review that order before the State Water Board. And so we did that because, even though there's some good things in the fourth agricultural order, it really doesn't do enough, doesn't go far enough in making sure that individual farmers monitor the water contaminants that's coming out of their farm, and they're contributing to contamination further downstream, and we don't, and there's not enough accountability if and when farmers violate their discharge requirements. So the agricultural order 4.0 is pending and is being reviewed by the State Water Board, and we expect a decision to come soon, perhaps as early as this fall, and hopefully the State Board will agree with us that the agricultural order really needs to be strengthened, so that agricultural operations can be held accountable, and make sure that they do their very best to minimize pollution to our waterways from their practices.
Yeah.
Another key project that I alluded to is, really going to be monitoring closely the groundwater sustainability plan and its implementation in the Salinas Valley primarily. And we're going to be working side by side with community residents from San Gerardo Cooperative, as well as from other disadvantaged communities in the region, to make sure that the groundwater sustainable plan is implemented in a way that protects residents and even helps clean up their contaminated drinking water.
Yeah.
And finally, I'm really excited to announce we're about to kick off a Water Leaders program starting this fall, over the next 2 years and hopefully more, to facilitate experiential learning trips for youth from disadvantaged communities like South Monterey County and Watsonville. And so that youth can go to and access our beautiful coastal resources, like Elkhorn Slough or the many beaches that we have. And our hope with the Water Leaders program is really to help youth experience in a personal way and learn about and witness the connection between the quality of their drinking water and coastal waters, because it's all connected. And, my ultimate hope through the Water Leaders program is to encourage our next generation to become stewards and water champions of their community.
Oh, that sounds really exciting. Are you going to involve these students in your legal and policy activities as well?
I think that's up to the students.
Okay.
I'll definitely share the history of Monterey Coastkeeper or Waterkeeper's work and our continuing work in pushing for stronger agricultural pollution control policies, and other legal work that we'll do in the future. And I suspect that youth from communities like San Gerardo or other disadvantaged communities, or even if they're not from a disadvantaged community, have stories to tell, on the safety of their drinking water, and are probably already leaders in their community in one way or another. So the Water Leaders program is really to facilitate experiential learning from youth that I know are taking leadership in their community, and I hope that through this program we can learn from each other and support each other and together advocate for a cleaner environment for everybody.
And you are listening to Sustainability Now here on KSQD. My name is Ronnie Lipschutz. I'm the host of the program, and my guest today is Chelsea Tu, who has just been appointed Executive Director of Monterey Waterkeeper, a new organization based in Monterey, but concerned about water quality in the entire region. Chelsea, there are many water organizations in the region and, of course, around the state. So how does Monterey Waterkeeper differ from these other organizations?
So I think we're different and unique in two ways, in that Monterey Waterkeeper really works at all of the key points where people influence the water cycle. And what I mean by that is we work on reducing pollution from the source, whether it's our policy for, whether we're pushing for policy to set high regulatory standards to reduce nitrate or pesticide pollution input from agricultural operations or from other sources, to all the way to the other end of working with community members to advocate for cleaning up their contaminated water. And so, we really look at water as a continuum of work, of which all of these points are really important from the beginning or end. And we do it all from the beginning to the end on water quality protection. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think most importantly, we are the only organization in the region that brings water quality enforcement. And this could look like litigating policies that violate water quality laws. Monterey Coastkeeper, the predecessor to Monterey Waterkeeper, has brought different lawsuits against the regional water board on failing to adopt strong agricultural pollution control policies. It could also look like moving forward, Monterey Waterkeeper brings citizen suits to ensure that polluting facilities comply with their discharge permit limits. So essentially, in addition to our science-based policy, as well as education and equitable access programs, we are not afraid to take legal action if and when it's necessary. Because of this, through legal action, we can create that necessary backstop to make sure that water quality requirements are met at the end of the day and that pollution is minimized from the source so that we can maximize the health of both people and natural ecosystems in the Central Coast.
Okay. Last couple of questions. The first one is, so what can people who are in affected communities do to push, as my colleague says, to push the noodle forward on this?
I think the first thing that community members can do is to know that their voices matter and that they should attend their local water district meeting or small water systems management meetings, because that's really where decisions about the safety and the cost of their drinking water are being made. And I think zooming out to the regional level, I'd encourage community members to individually or work with Monterey Waterkeeper to go before the Salinas Valley or other groundwater sustainability agencies and make sure that the decisions being made there in those sustainability agencies are benefiting or at least not harmful to disadvantaged community residents. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on in various agencies, in a myriad of agencies that control water supply or that manage water supply and water quality. So I think starting from where you live and finding out where these local and regional meetings are happening is important, and speaking about your everyday experience and in order to advocate for the highest water quality protection in your neighborhood is so important.
All right. And what can people do to get involved with Monterey Waterkeeper? And now I'm thinking about more than people in the affected communities, the interested members of the public.
Yes, you mentioned that we're still building our website, and that's true because we really formally launched in July. So we're continuing our legacy of advocacy while building our infrastructure, but we do have a website, and folks can feel free to visit it as we're building it out. www.montereywaterkeeper, all one word, .org. And you'll find my email on the website. Would I be able to share my email here, Ronnie?
Sure.
Okay. And folks should definitely feel free to reach out to me by emailing me at Chelsea, CHELSEA, at MontereyWaterkeeper.org as well.
Okay. Well, Chelsea, thank you so much for being my guest on Sustainability Now. I wish you, you have my best wishes, and I wish for great success for Monterey Waterkeeper, and that we'll be hearing more about it in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right. You are listening to KSQD 90.7 FM and ksquid.org, streaming on the internet. As a reminder, shows from the 5 to 6 p.m. Sunday slot are rebroadcast the following Tuesday mornings from 6 to 7 a.m. If you'd like to listen to previous shows, you can find them at ksquid.org/sustainabilitynow, as well as Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Pocket Casts, among other podcast sites. I want to thank Mary Whelan for pointing me to Chelsea 2 as a potential guest on Sustainability Now. And to the rest of you, thanks for listening. And thanks to all the staff and volunteers who make KSQD your community radio station and keep it going. And so, until next every other Sunday, Sustainability Now.
Cause you know you make us